Alright, I know I don't necessarily do this a lot on WoW. I don't really make any WoW content in general, but I feel like this is worth doing because a lot of people are getting confused and end up getting one shot and don't necessarily know what to pick and know what comes up on the Nulleaus fight or whatever his name is on the double question mark. So we'll just take a look. This is not the right delve, my bad. It's no longer used to getting there already. So yeah, we're gonna look a little bit into the basics. We're not gonna go too deep into it because I forgot to press the damn record button, and so it's a little bit annoying. So I don't have the kill clip nor the fight in general. That being said, there is a few specs that are going to be making your life a lot easier. But a lot of people seem to recommend going tanks if you can. I would tend to disagree. That would mostly depend on what kind of tank spec you're playing. This thing is, if you're playing with the tank spec, there is going to be a tank smash, and that tank smash is going to be fully physical damage. And so, if you're a little low on gear, and if you're not playing something such as a prot warrior or maybe a prot paladin or like maybe a monk even, you might get absolutely destroyed because on single target defensives, druid may get demolished. Although it does do pretty well, I guess, with the absorb talent, you can probably live it. And then if you go for like a blood DK, you might get one shot, which is what happened for me. And I played. I I think it might have been the first time I've played DK that well. I've played blood DK perfectly on that fight, and I tried for like 4 hours on opening on the server opening with like all my weeklies done, and that was close to impossible, if not simply impossible. I had all consumables and all enchants. So what I will recommend though is using drums if you're not able to lust. If you are planning on using a tank, be a little careful if you're playing as Blood DK. I'm not too sure about Vengeance DH, but I feel like that's a little dangerous. As a prot paladin, you can probably time your defensive correctly because you have a lot of them, and you can probably get a bunch of parries and blockings in as well, which would definitely avoid you getting one shot. As a Brewmaster, you can definitely do it. Only issue will be getting enough heal from Valera, because, well, you don't really have that much self-sustain to begin with as a Brewmaster. But you will definitely not get one shot, except maybe like the last phase if you don't have enough damage. And again, as really the only way that I could see you dying would be missing your heal absorb with the talent. If you're not playing tanks though, which again don't necessarily recommend playing tanks because of the enrage. Because the way the enrage works, from what I've seen, is the timer starts at 25% HP all the way to zero. This means that if you take your time for the first half of the boss, you'll be fine. But if you don't have bloodlust, if you don't have your potion for the last 25%, you'll be in trouble. You definitely want to get consumables ready for that and a bunch of enchants ready for that as well. Once that's done, I did that on like 244, I believe, and that was literally on the reset with all weeklies done except Mythic Zeros. So it is definitely doable. The race is now closed though, so this is merely just a guide for you to just get through it correctly and without too much trouble. That being said, if you are playing as a healer, apparently it is nearly impossible. I will say though that if you are playing as a healer, you may, if you, I'm not sure if you do get aggro, but if you do get aggro, it's probably impossible. If you do not have aggro though, there's one way for you to do it is to get Valera as a DPS, hoping that she interrupts the right thing, and hoping that she damages the 25% HP ad fast enough. But other than that, it seems a little bit difficult, depending on how long her cooldown is on her kick for the last phase. Because if the ad just if she cuts the ads, you'll be dead. If she cuts the boss, you won't be dead. That's the thing that you gotta remember. That's pretty much it. If you are playing a DPS, which is most specs, all you have to do really is just get your Valera as a healer, and hopefully she is not too low item level with it. And the way you'll do this is, from what I've seen in most skills, the go-to curiosities have to be the absorb one. That lets you get a shield every minute and a half if you take damage, making you go from lower than 40%. Gives you an absorb shield that gives you 40% HP. And you also get a damage increase on, like, a 15% damage increase for 8 seconds if you get the knock, if the shield triggers. It doesn't happen on the boss because the boss itself doesn't get knocked up. Uh, that sounds a little weird to say, my bad. It doesn't get knocked in the air. However, the smallies will get the debuff, so that's one thing you can do. The second curiosity that I've seen played a lot is the 25-second in combat you get a buff. The other one that I used to have, which one was it? Actually, no, I had this all along. Never mind. I had this one all the way. What I did have, though, on this one was the Chris, which it's not bad. It's very much the thing that does the most amount of damage. The other ones, actually, the blade is kind of cool too because you increase the chances of you getting crits, which is honestly probably the best one. Uh, but just more survivability is going to be better. Like, maybe if you're playing a tank, you could go for, like, more damage with crit chance. But if you are a DPS or a healer, you definitely want that survivability, I think. That's about it for Valera. I did it with her level, I think level 17. That was very, very smooth, not difficult at all. I mean, I'm lying, it was. If you have a little bit of gear and you have your enchants, I definitely recommend having a verse flask. If you have a bunch of leech, definitely play with leech on your enchants. If you have your pants enchanted as well, you'll be okay in general. I'm not sure about the weapon enchants, though I haven't checked them out too much. You may run a tank trinket if you do have one. That may help you. That did definitely help me through the last 25% as a blood decay. As an holy, though, what I did is just because, like, what happened is, um, as blood decay, the gear that I had just made it impossible. Like, that wasn't doable. I had everything. I had all my defensive talents, and then when I played all the defensive talents, eventually I got one shot. I started playing offensively. The same happened because I was still too slow with it. And I definitely played it correctly. So what I did is I instantly swapped to Unholy after 4 hours of trying, and I one-shot it. So the thing is, all you gotta remember is you pull it, you gotta kick the only ability that there is to interrupt. Try and kick late, just because you'll get that additional, like, no melee damage. And you will also get a little bit of time to get it lower, and it will eventually make it so usually you get, I feel like usually I get a cast around 76%, around 51%, and around 26%. Usually that's what happens. That's what happened for me as a blood DK. As in the holy, I didn't pay attention to it, but usually if you kick late, you can maybe grit a little bit on damage and avoid abilities and avoid melee damage. Gotta kick late. If you don't have a macro for focus and interrupt, I would definitely recommend using it on the boss regularly. This way, as you can see, my kick is directly on my focus. That helps you with the add at 25% HP. The way I would recommend doing this is at 75% HP, you save the cooldown for the ads because they do have a bleed and they do hurt a lot. But to be fair, it's not that insane. As an unholy, I didn't have anything else than the transformation, so it's a 45-second cooldown. It's okay. I used it on ads. I killed them. Then I went back to fighting and I used army. That's how it happened. Then at 50%, you get a bunch of ads. So you get 2 ads on the right side at 75%, and then at 50%, you get a bunch of smallies there that apply dot. So if you have an immune, you have an immune if you have a dispel. And by dispel, I think it's impossible to dispel it. I think it is bleed. It is magic bleed though, so you can't really dispel it. If you're a dwarf though, you can make it pretty easily. Um, but other than that, I would recommend just using maybe an AoE crowd control if you do have one, for like whenever you see a bunch of ads cast the bleed on you, and then just use a cooldown on these, because like these hurt a lot. If you get stacks of this will hurt a shitload. If you do have funnel, for like with Army of the Dead, for example, with Epidemic, Graveyard rather, you could just use it, if use a cooldown at the end of the cast. So this way you still have the ads, and then you can ramp on the boss, but you will get absolutely demolished by it. Again, as DPS, there's no tank smash, but the damage alone of the melees and the smallies is insanely high. And then once you are lowering it at 25% HP, he spawns an ogre in the middle, which does a bunch of casts. You don't need to bother interrupting. You can do probably like 2 interrupts as while he does the cast and he's not available, uh, just so you can avoid extra damage. But in general, just don't bother kicking it. There's one shadow ball, and then the other ability is a random puddle that you gotta dodge. So what I would recommend again is hard focusing on the ad. Don't use a cooldown on it, just wait. And as soon as he comes back up, the timer seems to start at that point. So what you should do is use a cooldown, cleave on the boss, but just main target the ad. Finish the ad, have macro focus on the Nulleaus, and just be ready to kick it at any point. Finish the ad, and then once it's done, attack the boss again on single target. What you should do though is bloodlust as soon as it's up. However, if you don't have any cleave, if you can't do 2 targets at all, you might want to hold lust. I don't know. I feel as though everyone has cleave in general, so that should be fine. But for example, as a Destrolock, if you don't have the double target thingy up, uh, I would just go single target in the ad, because it doesn't hurt that much. But if it overlaps with like a melee on from Nulleaus while enraged, you'll just die. So I would recommend finishing off the ad. That being said, it will definitely be easier with gear, so you probably can, with full champion maxed out, or like with full hero or full mythic, you can probably just ignore the 25% ad and just go full boss with the bloodlists, and that should be fine. That's about all the advice that I can give. That being said, if you do reach the enrage, if you have enough gear, you will get hit for like. If you have enough gear, you will not get one shot, but you might get hit for like 95 to 99% of your HP every single auto attack, which means you gotta think carefully about when you are looting Valera's balls and when you're standing on the green puddle for healing. And then what you should do though is, as soon as you see a black puddle, you should try and stand in it. What I usually did all along, especially near 25% HP, because of the fact that there's an ad that is casting constantly. What I did is, even though there's beams flying in the black hole pulling you, I stayed melee, just so I could cleave off of it as long as there's a black puddle. If the black puddle is not there, though, I just move out and just wait until the puddle is gone, so that I can the beam rather, the AOE is gone, so that I can go back into melee and cleave. That's about it. As a DK, the pulling doesn't really mean anything to me. I would assume that as a shadow priest or rogue, for example, the pulling might be annoying. So you gotta pay a little bit of attention to the orb spawning and moving around in the room. But that being said, the beams themselves don't do any damage. You don't have to rush to avoid them. What does do damage is standing on the puddle, and it doesn't do that much damage. Again, if you do reach the enrage and you get one shot through the auto attacks, you just have to get more gear. That's just about it. If not, then you're playing something wrong with your rotation. That's about all the advice that I can give. If you're struggling, well, I guess you can ask out, but by ask out I mean, tell if you comment if you did something wrong, if you're not having all of what I said, if you're using Valera as a DPS, you gotta check all this. You don't necessarily need to comment about anything because all I've said should get it killed for you. If you're playing the way I recommended, you should be fine. Fine, sorry. And that's what I've seen most kills. Although I didn't see much of them because I killed it like 700 or something in ranking. And as you can see, though, yeah, the Hall of Fame is done. So you gotta, it's done. It's over. But you do get the mount at the end, though, and you do get a title still, which is pretty good. And you do get extra crests that are not linked to the season, and like uncapped crests. So it's definitely worth doing. And you should get a cloak at the end. A cloak, not a cloak, the map at the end if you don't want to farm it or buy it at the NPC. I believe you can. I believe you get 100% chance of getting it, and then that gets you a hero track piece. Mine was this one, but you can get realistically anything that drops off of Delphs. That's about it for me. See you next time. Bye.